Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, a show where we will provide you fresh insights into South Asia's geopolitical, strategic and security situation. Let's take a look at the headlines first. British Kashmiris protest outside UK Parliament over crackdown in POJK. Pakistan Sikh community under fear after elderly couple killed inside Mardan, Gurdwara. And UNSC extends Afghanistan mission, flags rights and terror concerns. Thousands of British Kashmiris have taken to the streets of London to protest what they describe as Pakistan's escalating crackdown in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The demonstration comes amid growing international concern over reports of civilian deaths, mass arrests, internet shutdowns, and the banning of the Jammu Kashmir Joint Awami Action Committee or JAAC. Protesters gathered outside the UK Parliament demanding justice, accountability and international intervention.
Hundreds of British Kashmiris gathered outside the Palace of Westminster before marching through central London in one of the largest demonstrations by the Kashmiri diaspora in recent months. Carrying placards, banners and chanting anti-Pakistan slogans, protesters accused Islamabad of using excessive force against civilians in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The rally follows weeks of unrest in the region where Pakistan's security forces have been accused of opening fire on protesters, imposing curfews, suspending internet and mobile services and carrying out widespread arrests after banning the Jammu Kashmir Joint Awami Action Committee under anti-terrorism laws. Demonstrators alleged that dozens of civilians have been killed during the latest crackdown and urged the United Nations and international human rights organizations to intervene.
वो दिन दूर नहीं जब पाकिस्तान की तमाम मजलूम कौमें बाहर निकलेंगी, अपने हकूक के लिए आवाज उठाएंगी और आज आसम मुनीर हमारे मासूम लोगों को कत्ल करके खुश हो रहा है, लेकिन नहीं, कश्मीरियों का खून रहेगा, नहीं जाएगा, चैन से नहीं बैठेंगे, हमारे डीएनए में मज़ामत है, हम मरेंगे, अपने हकूक से पीछे नहीं हटेंगे। रेंजर्स जो मर्जी करे, पंजाब कांस्टेबल जो मर्जी करे, सहूलतकार जो मर्जी करे, हमारे अभी और जो है वो सरप्राइज आपको मिलेंगे।
The largest violence has intensified criticism of Pakistan's handling of the territory. According to rights groups, the crackdown has been accompanied by the deployment of federal paramilitary forces, arbitrary detention of activists, and communication blackouts across several parts of Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The International Human Rights Foundation has condemned what it described as the excessive use of force against peaceful demonstrators and called on Pakistani authorities to immediately end the violence, release detained activists, restore communication services, and revoke the ban of JAAC. The organization also pointed to a recurring pattern of violent suppression of public protests in the territory over the past 2 years.
जिन्होंने ये समझा था कि रियासती जम्मू कश्मीर के लोगों को कत्ल करके, उनको जख्मी करके, उन पर झूठे मुकदमे दर्ज करके उनको घरों में बंद कर देंगे, तो ऐसा मुमकिन नहीं है। रियासती जम्मू कश्मीर के लोग अपने मसाइल के हसूल के लिए, अपने हक को मनाने के लिए बाहर निकले हुए हैं और पाकिस्तान के हक जम्मू के सामने वो खड़े हैं। और आज पाकिस्तान और पाकिस्तानी सिक्योरिटी एजेंसीज को इल्म हो जाना चाहिए कि किस तरीके से पूरे पाकिस्तान के जेर इंतजाम जम्मू कश्मीर में हजारों की तादाद से जो है वो रियासत जम्मू कश्मीर के बाहर निकले हैं।
The protest in London reflects growing anger within the overseas Kashmiri community over Islamabad's response to the unrest in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The latest crisis began after authorities banned the Joint Awami Action Committee, a grassroots organization that has led public protests over political representation, governance failures, inflation, electricity prices, and economic hardship. Since then, Pakistani authorities have launched an extensive crackdown, registering sedition cases against protest leaders, announcing rewards for their arrest, and deploying additional police and paramilitary personnel across the region. Despite the heavy security presence, demonstrations and shutdowns have continued, highlighting deepening public dissatisfaction with Pakistan's administration of the territory. As protests spread beyond the region and onto the streets of London, international attention on Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is steadily growing. For the demonstrators, the protest was not merely a show of solidarity, it was a demand for accountability, justice and an end to what they describe as Pakistan's continued suppression of democratic voices in the territory.
Pakistan's minority communities are once again confronting questions over their safety after an elderly couple was shot dead inside a historic Gurdwara in Mardan in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The victims had served as caretakers of the shrine for nearly 2 decades. The incident has reignited concerns over the safety of religious minorities in Pakistan and drawn sharp reactions from political leaders and experts. Here's a report.
A sacred place of worship turned into a scene of a brutal double murder. Unknown gunmen entered a Sikh Gurdwara in Pakistan's Mardan district and opened fire on an elderly Sikh couple who had been living inside the shrine as its caretakers. The victims, identified as 70-year-old Jagannath and his wife Asma Wanti, had reportedly dedicated nearly 2 decades to serving the historic Gurdwara. Police say the attackers escaped immediately after the shooting, while an investigation has been launched into what authorities believe was a targeted killing. The attack occurred inside the historic Gurdwara located in Mardan's Babu Mohalla, nearly 60 kilometers from Peshawar. Preliminary findings have raised serious questions over security arrangements. The police guard assigned to protect the shrine was reportedly absent at the time of the attack, while investigators also found that the CCTV recording system was not functioning. A special investigation team has now been formed to trace those responsible.
The fact that they are not Muslims is crime enough for them to be targeted. You know, if you look at social media, if you look at the preachings of certain clerics in Pakistan, the amount of abuse and criticism that is directed towards the Sikh community is amazing. You know, all sorts of things from theological arguments to personal arguments are thrown at them. Then for somebody who is impressionable to actually go to a mosque and shoot them is not a light thing. Because this did not happen in a marketplace, it happened in a religious institutions where prayers were being offered. People go in, they shoot and they come away. So this points to a deeper malaise in Pakistan's polity and society.
The killings have once again drawn attention to the deteriorating security environment for Pakistan's religious minorities. Over the years, rights organizations have documented repeated incidents involving attacks on places of worship, forced conversions, targeted violence and discrimination against Sikhs, Hindus, Christians and other minority communities. Analysts say these latest killings are likely to deepen fear among Pakistan's already shrinking Sikh population and reinforce concerns over the state's ability to ensure their protection. The incident also drew a strong reaction from India. Indian politician Tarun Chugh described the killing as barbaric and deeply disturbing, alleging that the Pakistan has repeatedly failed to protect its religious minorities.
पाकिस्तान की सरकार लगातार अपने वहाँ पर रह रहे अल्पसंख्यक हिंदू, सिख उनकी सुरक्षा करने में नाकाम रही। जबकि नेहरू लियाकत समझौता 1950 में हुआ था, जिसमें दोनों देशों में रहे अल्पसंख्यकों की रक्षा की गारंटी दोनों सरकारों ने ली। आज 20% आबादी, जो 24% आबादी हिंदुओं और सिखों की थी पाकिस्तान में, आज वो घटकर 1% से भी कम रह गई है।
Rights groups have repeatedly highlighted concerns over the safety of religious minorities, pointing to recurring incidents of violence, intimidation, and attacks on places of worship.
Religious sites of minorities, their temples, their mosques, their churches, are under any police protection. And possibly it may not be feasible to provide police protection to every house of worship that belongs to the minorities. That is not the issue. The issue is the following. Why do persons feel so emboldened that they feel that they can go into a Gurdwara, a church or a temple and do whatever they want? They can break up idols, they can shoot people randomly, they can hurl abuse. Obviously, there is something that tells them that you can get away with this particular act.
Police investigations are continuing, but no arrests have yet been announced. As Pakistan searches for those behind the killings, Sikh organizations and rights advocates continue to demand not only justice for the victims, but stronger protection for vulnerable communities and their places of worship. For Pakistan's Sikh minority, the attack has once again exposed the persistent challenges of security, religious freedom, and equal protection under the law.
The United Nations Security Council has unanimously extended the mandate of its mission in Afghanistan for another year, underscoring growing international concern over the country's humanitarian crisis, the deteriorating rights of women and girls, and the continued threats posed by terrorist groups operating within its borders. The move comes as Afghanistan remains largely cut off from the international community nearly 5 years after the Taliban returned to power. A report.
The 15-member Security Council voted unanimously to extend the mandate of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, known as UNEMA, until June 17, 2027. The resolution drafted by China reaffirms the UN's role in supporting peace, stability, and humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. It also calls for a strategic review of the mission to improve coordination across UN operations and strengthen implementation of its mandate. The Council says Afghanistan continues to face serious humanitarian, economic, and security challenges nearly 5 years after the Taliban returned to power.
The Council's unity in supporting of a strong UNAMA mandate sends an important message. The people of Afghanistan deserve protection, dignity, accountability, and a future defined by rights, opportunity, and hope, rather than fear and repression.
The mandate extension comes at a time when Afghanistan continues to grapple with one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises. According to the United Nations, millions of Afghans remain dependent on humanitarian assistance as the country struggles with widespread poverty, food insecurity, unemployment, and the lasting consequences of decades of conflict. Human rights concerns featured prominently during the Security Council debate. A substantial portion of the Security Council debate focused on human rights, particularly the situation facing women and girls under Taliban rule. Since returning to power in 2021, the Taliban have imposed a series of restrictions that have dramatically curtailed women's participation in public life. Girls remain barred from secondary schools and universities. Women face severe restrictions on employment, movement, and public participation. International organizations have repeatedly warned that the measures amount to systematic discrimination and have deepened Afghanistan's isolation from the global community. Those concerns have intensified in recent weeks following reports that dozens of women were detained in the western city of Herat for allegedly violating the Taliban's strict dress code. According to UNEMA, protests that followed the arrests were forcibly dispersed, resulting in casualties and injuries. The resolution also demands unrestricted access for Afghan women working with the United Nations.
We hope that the Afghan government will heed the legitimate calls of its people and the international community, take more proactive measures to protect human rights, especially the rights of women, and project an image of openness, inclusivity, and responsibility. Security remained another key focus of the meeting.
The Security Council voiced serious concerns over the presence of terrorist groups in Afghanistan and called for stronger regional and international cooperation to combat extremism and prevent the illicit flow of weapons. The resolution authorizes UNEMA to facilitate dialogue between Afghan authorities, neighboring countries and the broader international community. It also supports efforts to promote regional connectivity, economic development and conditions for the voluntary and dignified return of Afghan refugees.
For that political process to succeed, the Taliban must act. The Taliban must meet their counterterrorism commitments, respect Afghanistan's international obligations, end hostage diplomacy, and cease their unconscionable abuses of the human rights of women and girls.
The Security Council has requested Secretary General Antonio Guterres to submit a strategic review of UNEMA by March 2027 and continue providing quarterly reports on developments in Afghanistan. The Council says maintaining the UN mission's presence across the country remains critical as Afghanistan confronts humanitarian needs, economic hardship, terrorism threats and growing international concern over human rights.
Pakistan's newly announced federal budget is being projected by the government as a roadmap to economic recovery. But for many ordinary citizens, the promises of relief appear far removed from their daily struggles. As inflation continues to erode household incomes and the cost of essential goods keep rising, public frustration is mounting over what many see as a budget that offers little respite. Our next report looks at how Pakistan's economic policies are being received on the streets of Karachi. Struggling with persistent inflation, rising utility bills, and shrinking household incomes, many Pakistanis say economic hardship remains their biggest concern. Against this backdrop, Pakistan unveiled a budget worth approximately $67.5 billion for the fiscal year 2026-27, with higher allocations for defense and reduced development spending. Presenting the budget in the National Assembly amid opposition protests, Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb said the economy had achieved important milestones despite regional and global challenges. However, reactions from citizens in Karachi painted a different picture, with many questioning the government's claim that the budget is people-friendly.
देखिए जी, हुकूमत तो कहती है कि अवाम दोस्त और बेहतरीन बजट है, लेकिन बजट के अंदर जो है सैलरीज पे ऊपर जो है टैक्स को कम किया गया, लेकिन बकाया जो ख़ास तौर पे रोज़मर्रा की अशिया है, शैम्पू है, दूध है, दीगर चीज़ों के ऊपर जो है वो टैक्स ज़्यादा लगा दिए गए। एक तरफ आवाम को वज़ीर-ए-आज़म ख़ुद तकरीर में उन्होंने उनका आवाम का शुक्रिया अदा किया कि उन्होंने जो है वो सख्त जो इक़दामात किए थे उसके ऊपर जो आवाम ने उनका साथ दिया, लेकिन उसके साथ आवाम को रिलीफ नहीं दिया गया। आवाम की आम उनको चीज़ें सस्ती चाहिए, आटा, दालें और इसके साथ गोश्त और जो डेयरी है, फिर दीगर मसनूआत है, दूध है, जैसे बच्चों के जो पीने का दूध है, फिर इसके बाद जो है शैम्पू है, आयल है और ये खाने पीने का जो आयल है खाने का, उसके ऊपर भी टैक्सेस का इजाफा कर दिया, जिसकी वजह से महंगाई का एक जो तूफ़ान रुका हुआ था और ज़्यादा उसके अंदर जो है वो बढ़ गया। बजट के अंदर हालांकि रिलीफ देना चाहिए था, लेकिन रिलीफ नहीं दी गया। इसी
Residents argue that while the budget includes some tax relief for salaried individuals, higher taxes on several everyday consumer goods could further increase the cost of living. Citizens say essential items such as food products, dairy goods, and household necessities remain beyond the reach of many families already struggling with inflation. For many low-income households, the rising prices of food and healthcare continue to be a major concern. Some residents say the budget fails to address the challenges faced by the poorest sections of society, particularly those dealing with chronic health conditions and increasing medical expenses.
बजट क्या, बस आवाम का खून निचोड़ने का बजट है। जिन हुक्मरानों को जो सीटें गवर्नमेंट सर्विस और मुराद मिली हुई है उनके लिए तो कुछ भी नहीं है, वो इसलिए कि वो आवाम की टैक्सों से ही वो चल रहे हैं। बाकी रहा गरीब का, गरीब तो इस वक्त इस कदर मर गया कि मैं खुद हार्ट पेशेंट हूँ, शुगर का मरीज़ हूँ। जो दवा मुझे 160 रुपये में मिलती थी, आज वो 500 रुपये की हो गई है, तो आप अंदाज़ा लगा लें मैं दवा से भी दूर हो गया।
The public response highlights the gap between the government's economic projections and the daily realities faced by many Pakistanis. While Islamabad projects its fiscal consolidation and economic recovery, citizens in Karachi say meaningful relief can only be measured through affordable food, medicine, and basic necessities. Critics argue that higher defense allocations, coupled with lower development spending, reflect misplaced priorities at a time when millions are struggling with inflation and unemployment. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views, and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, to keep writing to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.